Cece, can you see my screen?
I can, yep.
Okay, great. Let's just, I know it's a little before 9.
Yeah,
We'll admit everyone and I'll just explain that we're gonna get started in a little bit. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for logging in for the Property Tax Working Group meeting for today, July 23rd. We will get started at 9.
Can I hear her? I can't hear her.
She's muted. She needs to unmute herself.
Thank you for whoever said that. Even I struggle with technology sometimes. So I will repeat myself. Welcome to the Property Tax Working Group meeting for July 23rd. This is the final meeting of the Property Tax Working Group. And this meeting does look very different than meetings that we had starting at the beginning of the process. We're in a purely virtual setting. So I appreciate your patience and you're willing to adapt to this new situation. But I think during these next 2 hours, we'll have a lot to discuss, and I think we'll find that even in a virtual setting, we're able to have the discussions that we need. My name is Samantha McLean. I'm with the Department of City Planning, and I have been working with the co-chairs, Vice Mayor Christopher Smitherman and Carol Gibbs, for the last year and a half in facilitating and providing logistical support for this working group. So I just want to get started real quick with a brief overview of the meeting agenda. We'll first go over some virtual meeting housekeeping. We'll hear a welcome from the co-chairs. I will introduce the working group members who are on the call today. We'll briefly go over the purpose and the background of the working group for those of you who might be joining for the first time. The co-chairs will outline the goal of today's meeting, and then we'll get to the meat of the meeting, which is the presentation of the recommendations from each of the focus recommendation groups, and then a vote on those recommendations. And we'll conclude with next steps from the co-chairs at the end. This meeting will end at 11 o'clock today. So real quick, with some virtual meeting housekeeping, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube and will be available for viewing afterwards. Working group members, we ask that you remain muted throughout this meeting unless you are speaking. That'll just help with the clarity of communication. And then any members of the public who are with us today, thanks for being here. We ask that you submit any questions or comments via the chat bar function in Zoom. And then we will read any questions that are relevant to the conversation. A staff member will be reading them throughout the meeting. We will have a recording of the chat bar, so all that public comment will be submitted to the co-chairs at the conclusion of this meeting. Since we do only have a 2-hour time period, we are going to ask that working group members keep to about 2 minutes during the discussion. If you are speaking, I will be the time recorder for that. And I think that's it. If you have any technical issues or questions, feel free to use the chat bar. We have someone monitoring that and they'll be able to help you out. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Vice Mayor Christopher Smitherman and Carol Gibbs, the co-chairs of this working group.
Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate it. I will be brief. I do want to thank all of the property tax working group members for a year and a half of a lot of hard work. And I want to thank the administration for everything that they've done, specifically Samantha for supporting this, this initiative. And I want to say that this is our last meeting. My goal is, and my dog Skip's goal is, that this be very productive. So I think it's important that we limit our comments, meaning as we're talking about these issues, try to keep your comments to 1 or 2 minutes so that we can get as many people involved with the conversation. And lastly, our goal is to hear from each of the committees and their recommendations and vote on those. And so we want to move forward as quickly as we can to get through the recommendations. And I want to thank my wonderful co-chair, Carol Gibbs, who brought this to my office and has really been the driver of it. And I have been really appreciative of her vision of all of this. And when she came to my office with the idea, it took a little convincing, but you know, Carol is quite persuasive. And so I'm very appreciative of it. And my goal is to take this before council with the support of this group and hopefully get a 9-0 vote for the recommendations. Thank you, Samantha, and the members.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I'm not sure. And I also appreciate everybody's hard work. You know, a year and a half is a long time, and we've listened to a lot of advice and a lot of thoughts from professionals, and of course it got extended by 3 months for the COVID-19. Thank you very much, Mr. COVID. But again, this is our last meeting, and we hope that we'll get some good positive results out of it. Take it away, Samantha.
Thank you to both of you. Before getting started, I just want to acknowledge the working group members. On your screen, this is not an inclusive list of all members. These are some members that have been in regular attendance to our meeting, but I do just want to acknowledge the working group members on the call today. We have Eve Bolton from the CPS Board of Education, Mark Corey from the Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors, Mike Wagner from the Cincinnati Neighborhood Business Districts United, Sharon Watkins from the Community Action Agency, Ron Roblando from the Hispanic Chamber, Dan Dressman from the Home Builders Association, Callie Kaku from LISC, Paul Yankee from the U.S. Green Building Council, Rick Williams from the Home Ownership Center, Robbie Suggs from Homebase, Eric Kearney from the African American Chamber, Chris Offrey from the UC School of Planning, Heather Sturgill from Housing Opportunities Made Equal. And I'm looking at my list. I think I got everyone, but if there is a working group member that I missed, please unmute yourself now and introduce yourself.
Suzanne Burke from the Council on Aging.
Thank you, Suzanne.
I think there's someone here from Legal Aid too.
Is there anyone here representing Legal Aid, the Legal Aid Society on the working group?
John Schreider, are you going to represent Legal Aid?
Yes, sorry, I was needing to unmute my phone. Good morning, John Schreider from Legal Aid.
Okay. Thank you very much. So in addition to the co-chairs and the working group members, we also have some city staff support here with us today, but then also throughout the process. So from city planning, we have Catherine Keogh-Jers. Today, city planning staff have been helping out with this throughout the process, but today we have Stacey Hoffman, Scott Gafford, and Kira Palmer. Stacey Hoffman will be monitoring the chat bar, and Kira and Scott will be taking notes for us. From Community and Economic Development, we have Dan Bauer. From the Law Department, we have Erica Fauborg and Caitlin Geiger. And then from the Vice Mayor's Office, we have Perry Ann Allen and Michelle Edwards. So whether they are here with us today or not, they've been here throughout the process. So as the Vice Mayor and Carol said, the purpose.
So could I just say hello? This is David Mann. I decided to listen in and learn something. So apologize for the interruption.
Thanks, David.
Sure.
Yes, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Chairman Mann, for coming on. I appreciate that.
Thank you for everything you're doing, both of you. Thanks.
So the purpose of the working group, or the working group in general, emerged from a conversation, as the Vice Mayor said, between him and Carol, coming to him with this concern about the issue of rising property taxes and keeping seniors and people living with disabilities in their homes. So this working group was founded by a motion, a council motion in fall of 2018, with the charge of exploring this issue of rising property taxes and what could be done with that property tax relief for seniors and people living with disabilities, but then also reviewing the city's tax abatement program. I do not expect you to read everything that's on this slide right now, but this timeline just, it's here to illustrate that this has been a year-long process. Throughout the last year and a half, there have been, I have to consult my notes, over 13 meetings, 3 meetings that were specifically to get public feedback, and then 2 surveys that had over 650 responses. So all of these meetings, whether the working group was hearing from experts in the field, reviewing public feedback, all of this brought us to where we are today. Most recently, earlier this month, the focus recommendation groups refined their recommendations and finalized them to bring us here today. So with that, the goals of the meeting, I know the Vice Mayor and Carol touched on this before, but is to present and vote on the recommendations from the 3 focus recommendation groups. The focus recommendation groups served as almost subcommittees of this working group. So you'll see the 3 groups before you now: resources for low and limited income residents, property tax relief for seniors and people living with disabilities and special needs, and the residential tax abatement policy review. We are going to go through the recommendations in that order, and I'll be asking the chairs of each of those groups to present the recommendations. We will then allow some time for any questions or clarifications, and then we'll have a vote on the recommendations as written. Vice Mayor Carroll, do you have anything to add?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't.
So with that, I'd like to introduce Rick Williams, who is the chair of the Focus Recommendation Group for Resources for Low and Limited Income Residents. Rick, if you want to unmute yourself now, and we can get started.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
You can.
Can.
Oh, but you can't see me. Our technology is new, so glad that you can hear me. The recommendations, I'm sure everyone has a copy. There are certain things that we need to discuss. I want to say, though, as we move through the list. And the first is, it's written there, the approach that we took was to honor the residents' perspective, and our focus was on homeowners. So we wanted to make sure that their perspective and they were the consideration that drove our recommendations. And in addition, we wanted the recommendations to be rather structural, such that it recommended us a systems change such that there could be some longevity in the recommendations as they support the residents. So the first recommendation is the creation of an online portal with programs and resources for residents, both homeowners and renters. And the discussion came from how a portal works with the Office of Performance and Data Analytics. And this is currently a city office, and so we were looking for that to be expanded, considering that is something that's in place right now and could be expanded to actually serve better the homeowners with regard to this issue. So since the precedent has been made, we thought that would be the first recommendation. The second recommendation is to create a housing court. There's been a lot of conversation about housing court. And as we submit this recommendation, we're also aware that this one is not one that just simply happens because of the city council vote. There are a lot of other things that have to happen simultaneously, but we wanted it on the list because it would be a structural support for homeowners and other residents. Making housing a priority is the third one, and that was put there in order to provide someone who's regularly addressing housing issues. There are housing issues that will be on this very topic of tax abatement that'll be brought up by the other subcommittees. We wanted to make sure that these issues, as well as issues that relate to housing that aren't even on the topic of tax abatement, someone's there to address them. It's someone's job to bring the other departments in the loop as they need to be, such that there could be a needed way for housing issues to be addressed in the city. And the last is a code complaint, geography, a code in a geography area. A code complaint exists in a geography area that there's a social worker that accompanies the building inspector, because we pointed out the fact that inspectors deal with one facet, like the end result of clearly broader problems, and there needs to be a different set of eyes and skills addressing those other problems that contribute to the end result of an enforcement issue. So, and there was some support from that from the Director of Buildings and Inspections. This is our fourth recommendation.
Rick,
Fifth is,
Rick,
yes.
I'm sorry, this is Samantha. I apologize. I realize recommendation 5 did not make it on the slide.
oh, okay.
So, and that's just an announcement for the working group. Rick will be talking about recommendation 5. You don't see it on your screen, but it does exist. That was a typo.
Recommendation 5 is a secret, and I won't be discussing it. Recommendation 6 is, no, I'm joking. Recommendation 5 is creating a lending program for contractors who work fairly with seniors and low-income residents. The lending program here is a way to start to create a system of support of access for homeowners to have quality contractors available to them. It also served as a way to create jobs and economic opportunity for the small contractor part of our economic system locally in the city. That this was a recommendation that had the opportunity to address multiple issues and provide multiple layers of support. And that this is not just something to be checked, a box checked, to have one organization that does it or some funding stream that does that. It's more of creating the economic system, having that in place that provides quality contractors and an access to those quality contractors so that there can be choice for homeowners. Recommendation 6 is to provide funding for organizations that work with homeowners to help them stay in their homes. Information on these organizations are on the portal, and we did not want to start to list specific organizations as if they were the recommendation. The point of this one, though, is that if that czar that we recommended earlier is in place, that a part of their responsibility will be to connect to those organizations that provide quality support along the lines of supporting the homeowners and residents and other housing issues. Number 7 is to look at other cities and how they're addressing the recommendations that are listed. And as you can imagine, there are various cities that are in different places of different parts of our recommendation. And we didn't see the need to start from scratch. They are a resource for how we move forward. And finally, lobby the state to make changes that benefit home retention for individuals with low and limited income disabilities and seniors. We are clear that a lot of the recommendations that are coming from our subgroup, as well as others, are not the jurisdiction of City Council, and therefore they cannot make the decisions and the proper changes. But they can lobby for those policy changes and change of laws to the state, at the state level, and we are just looking for that to be a commitment from City Council. Those are the.
I would like to
I just want to say I'm done. Every time you start, it interrupts. I'm sorry.
I wanted to make a recommendation for 5, that we change businesses to minority-owned and women-owned businesses?
That's fine. I would support that, and I'm sure the other committee members would as well.
And one of the working group members, Eric Kearney, has a question. He put it in chat. But if you unmute yourself, you could ask it, Eric.
Oh, okay. I just wondered thank you for that. I just wondered with recommendation number 4, where would how many, are there enough social workers to do that? Where would they come from? What department? I was just curious about kind of the execution on that particular one.
Carol and Rick, this is Erica. I can speak to that. Okay, so I am aware that the building department does have a hiring position open for a single social worker. It is going to be, I think, a triage situation, and that social worker will go along with code inspectors on situations where they know or have reasonable belief that an individual needs social services connections. That said, that is one department and one individual. I am aware that there are these discussions in various other sectors across the city, but right now that's the only thing that we have that is concrete and moving forward.
Art has also talked to some of us in the neighborhoods about aligning his department with the CDCs or other organizations in the community to help him to work through buildings that are being reported so that we can try and cut down on false reports or reports that are trying to threaten people, homeowners.
So I just have another question, and I don't want to delay it because I know you've got a lot of material to go through. But would a social worker know about the funds that are available, or do you need like somebody with financial expertise, or do the social workers have that knowledge as part of their work?
This is Erica again. The goal is that social worker will be connected with the city's broader housing support resources and others throughout the county. But of course, that is one individual, and I can't speak to what that one individual might know in the future.
Right. Okay.
Is it possible? I'm sorry, Eric, let me jump in real quick. It's Mike Wagner. Is it possible that we could provide training for building and inspections so that they knew what tools were available and could actually do this on their own if they weren't accompanied by a person, a social worker? I think when we're talking about, training police to do better jobs and to treat people better, we might consider this for the building and inspections, and also provide either a brochure or something of that nature that gives all the information that is available out there. I know this will change over time, but I think it would be something that would be helpful, and it'll give the opportunity to make sure we're doing it right at first, as opposed to just waiting for to be able to have a social worker.
This is Erica again. The building department currently does receive regular training and is educated on what resources are out there. Art Dahlberg and I and others in the law department and the building department and throughout the city do work hand in hand with many policy makers and outside service agencies to make sure that we have the best information to provide. There are specific documents that are provided to tenants, to property owners, when a property is falling into a code repair situation. So that is happening to some extent. I also agree that conversation will probably develop over the next year, and those efforts will be more citywide.
Samantha?
Yes, Eve.
I know in the school board world that we're living in now, language is very important. And while I think this is a great, great idea and should be done, I'd really prefer a term like citizen advocate or something. I don't mean to be rude, but social worker also is sort of deeming something to be economically needed or sociologically needed, or it begins to categorize our citizens. And so we're trying to work our way through having as much universal language as possible that is not pejorative or does not already cast light in some direction. So just to throw that out there, because this person may be the social worker that you need, but they also might have, as somebody said, other experiences and expertise, but really more generically to talk about this as having citizen advocates.
I think what was looking for here was literally someone who had an MSW. But I agree that probably the job title could be something else.
Certainly.
And I should mention, each of this group and the group that you'll be hearing from next have an accompanying spreadsheet for their recommendations, which outline kind of the approach, like the steps that they think might need to be taken at what level. And then there's another column for any notes or considerations. So the conversation that's happening today about being careful about the language, including minority and women-owned businesses in the recommendation for 5, we'll certainly be making it into those notes. It wasn't conducive to put on a PowerPoint slide, but those notes do exist, so we'll be sure to add.
And this is Rick. It was intentional to say social worker here. So the advocacy is a part of the work, absolutely, but there are skills that social workers have that are needed for the conversation and for the work that we're describing here. So it's great to have advocacy as a part of the role description, and I think these positions, it sounds like Erica said that there are other departments looking at this. That's all great. I believe that each department's version of this work will look different appropriately, but it was intentional to have social work here.
But I'm sure it was.
Thanks, Rick. So I do not see any questions from the chat bar. Stacey, I just want to check. Are there anything in the chat bar?
There is nothing new.
Okay. With that, is there any other discussion? If not, I will call a vote on these recommendations.
I'll second.
Okay. So this is voting in the property tax working group is not something that's been done in every meeting. So I just want to clarify how we will do it today. Before you are the recommendations. You'll be voting on these recommendations. I am going to call out the organization or affiliation and be asking for a vote. So for example, I won't be calling Eve Bolton, I'll be saying Board of Education. And it's 1 vote per working group affiliation. Are there any questions at this moment about how the vote will proceed? Okay. So I will, and so it's a yes or a no vote. Yes to approve the recommendations, no to not approve. So starting with the African American Chamber.
Yes.
Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
Yes.
Board of Education.
Yes on all recommendations.
Cincinnati Neighborhood Business Districts United.
Yes.
Council on Aging.
Yes.
Community Action Agency. Okay. Is there anyone on from the Community Action Agency? Okay. Home Builders Association.
Dan, are you muted? Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I'm a yes.
Thank you. Housing opportunities made equal?
Heather,
Heather, you're muted, it seems. We'll come back to home. The Home Ownership Center,
Yes.
Home Base. Anyone on from Home Base?
Robbie should be on, but I don't know if she is.
I'm not seeing her on the participant list.
Maybe you should tell everyone it's *6.
Oh, so anyone on calling in on a phone that needs to unmute, *6 is how you unmute. Okay, I don't see anyone here from Invest in Neighborhoods. The Legal Aid Society,
Yes.
LISC,
Yes.
the Hispanic Chamber,
Yes.
don't see it. UC School of Planning,
Yes.
okay, thank you. US Green Building Council,
Yes.
and Carol Gibbs, co-chair,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Smitherman.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to circle back to housing opportunities made equal. Heather, I can see you if you, okay, great. And real quick, just because in this virtual setting, it's hard to see who is on the call and who is left. Did I miss anyone from that was a working group member? Okay. Great. Well, the recommendations passed unanimously. Thank you to Rick and everyone else that worked on this set of recommendations. Thanks.
I just wanted, I should have mentioned that with the motion. There was a modification recommended by Carol of restating the companies and the recommendation that they be minority or women owned. Does that become just a part of the recommendation as it is moving forward?
Hi, Rick. I had that in the notes, and I believe during the discussion, everyone had agreed upon it. So that will be edited for recommendation 5.
Okay.
5, yes.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Okay. Moving on. So the second group of recommendations we'll be hearing about today is from the group that was focused on property tax relief for seniors and people living with disabilities and special needs. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Sturgill, who is the chair of this focused recommendation group.
Thank you all for attending. So the first part of this that we're going into is section 1, tax relief, discount and deferral. And that the city actually has no direct control over. This is modifications at the state level related to the homestead exemption. So the city would be passing a resolution, and this would require broader education efforts across the entire state for this to actually go into effect or change anything. Along with that, there is information that is going to be necessary to gather before that can happen. So these are just the base level recommendations that are probably going to be modified based on the research that needs to go into it that we did not have access to yet. So the qualifications for this are that you own and occupy your property, be 65 or older, or the owner or dependent resident be that is certified by a licensed physician or psychologist or a state or federal agency to have a permanent disability as of the year that they are applying. Also, the surviving spouse of a person who was receiving the previous homestead exemption at the time of death can continue the homestead exemption. Then something else that was added is for returning residents, for low-income surviving house members that have lived there for 10 years or more to also continue getting some of the discount. That would be reassessed after the senior or person with a disability no longer identify the property as their primary residence, but it would continue in some form or another for the surviving spouse. The next part of that is the specific what you're getting. So not just the qualifications, now we're to the discount. That would change from what it currently is, which is pretty much a fixed amount, and it would be based on income, and it applies to the home and 1 acre of property, and it applies to the assessed increase in value. So whatever your property taxes were when you purchased it, the assumption is that you can continue paying those property taxes. We're talking about properties that the assessed value has increased hundreds of percentage above and beyond what they were when they were purchased. So there would be a cap. If you make 120% or more of the area median income, you got to pay the property taxes. You're in the upper quartile of income. You should be able to afford the property taxes. Now, for middle income people, 80 to 120%, the cap is 100% of the increase of the property. So if you had a property that was $100 and it gained in value an additional $200, you would be responsible for an additional $100, which would be 100% of the original property tax. Then if you're 50 to 80% of area median income, then your cap would be 50% of the original value. And then if you're 30 to 50% of area median income, the cap would be 20%. And if you're under 30% of area median income, so you're extremely low income, the cap would be 5%. So if you was $100 and it was raised an additional $200, you would only be responsible for $5. Okay, then there's the deferral. This applies to the percent of property tax that was not discounted. So people on fixed income, it goes up, more than it goes up 100%, and you're fixed income and you cannot pay that. If you qualify for any of the above, then you automatically qualify for a deferral. And we're looking, and part of the thing that needs to be more research is also only if you were, or if you were a resident for maybe 10 or 15 years, if you owned that property for 10 or 15 years. So long-term property owners might also be able to benefit, but that needs to be determined based on how many people, what percentage of the population, percentage of homeowners that applies to. So that needs to be looked at. But you would be able to get a deferral on that amount, and then that deferral would end when the death of the original recipient or dependent with a disability, or when it changed hands, when the property was sold. So the sales from that would have to pay the taxes, and then whatever's left over then goes to the people that, the family members. Whatever's left then goes to the family members. Let's see. Do I need to ask for questions at this point, or should I continue and then ask questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So in the discounts, you're talking about an assessment of the increase in the property value, but are you limiting that to increase of property value due to development or redevelopment? Or are you saying that if I move into my house today and 15 years from now, my property value has increased, which we all assume and hope that it does, that I can apply for this, for this, what are you calling it? Discount? Can anybody apply?
So, currently, the homestead exemption you can. So yes.
Okay. But the homestead exemption doesn't go down to 5% of the increase, I don't think. So you're
no, this would be a way of helping low income, extremely low income homeowners.
okay.
Heather, this is Samantha. Since your recommendation, the group's recommendations are in 3 sections, I'm comfortable with if there are any questions about this first section, tax relief, discount, and deferral, for working group members to express them now before moving on.
I just had a question about, it doesn't impact the money that would go to schools, right?
It would, and that's why we need questions answered about the percentage of people that this would apply to, so that we can fine tune this. So as I said, there are quite a few questions that need to be answered that we did not have access to before making these recommendations. And these recommendations would need to be fine tuned before they go on to City Council for a resolution. So we need to define, we need to find out how many properties this applies to. This might not apply to very many properties, and it might not be very much money considering the amount of properties or the values of those properties.
Thank you.
So then can we even vote on this?
So this is Suzanne. I just wanted to comment kind of on our organization's position, and I was on the subgroup, but we don't support the discount. We do support the deferral. I think there's too many unanswered questions on the discount. And we also feel that the deferral is more, from a statewide ability to get relief for seniors, a deferral is more likely to get changed than a discount and a deferral. So we have concerns about that. And then lastly, on the section before this, we don't agree with, I think it was E. Yes. We agree with A, B, C, and D, but we believe adding E gets beyond the scope of seniors. And so those are the 2 areas we don't agree with. And that has been discussed among both our advisory council and our board. So I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Yeah, for context, I think we did a rough order of magnitude discussion on this. So demographically, if you look at seniors, that's going to be about 20% of your population. And then breaking that down, how many of those are homeowners? And further breaking that down, of those homeowners, how many of them would fall into the economically disadvantaged levels? And I think, to contextualize that, we are not taking any money away. It's simply an effect on the growth rate. And at that, it is going to be not as big as one would imagine. So we did have a discussion on the rough order of magnitude. So we really need to contextualize that. This is not a basis for not voting on this.
And we think that we would get a lot more support once we have the figures, like Ron said, of exactly how much money we're talking. Because in the likelihood that it's going to be a significant amount is honestly a bit low.
The figures we were given early on were that there was a 38% owner occupied homes in Cincinnati, and that 62% of them were seniors. Whether or not, Ron's figures of, I think he said 20%, if not, I'm sorry, being low income, I don't have any idea of that. I'm just worried that taking to the state a discount and a deferral are gonna, although I don't know, now the House Speaker's in the prison, I don't know.
I think that's part of our concern too. Carol, we do a lot of advocacy to get something like this passed, and I'm sure Eric can also comment on this. You have to have like statewide support for this type of thing across different groups. And we believe if we can get movement on this at all, it will be discount and not both of them. That's just our opinion. And we understand there are differing opinions, but that's where we kind of landed as an organization.
Could I ask a question, Samantha? Is there any possibility that the group might be willing to separate the discount from the deferral as a recommendation, or subset it in some way? At the current, the school board basically doesn't necessarily want to vote against this, but I'm sure I'll have to abstain rather than show any kind of support for some of this. I know that abstention counts as to the credit of the prevailing group, but still, we'd be hard pressed to go back and talk about this right now without the kind of knowledge that we would need.
Well, this says that these resolutions would go forward only after the research has been done on how much this applies to, how much money this would be, the percentage of people that this would affect, and priority level, can change based on that information, and we expect that this would change with further information, which we just do not have at this time. So it's a generalized recommendation now, but before it actually goes to City Council or anything else, there would be significantly more work and research. And this would then, I think, go towards the recommendation that was put forward by recommendation 3 from the previous group, where there's a housing czar and a group similar to this, which was not stressed, but it was part of the recommendation for recommendation number 3 from the previous group, is that there would be a group continuing to work on these issues.
And I appreciate that. I just, as a representative from the board, I hesitate, since this is public record, to go on the record in favor, even though we might in our hearts of hearts believe in all of this, especially at this time regarding any kind of financial diminishing for us. But thank you. I appreciate all that you're doing. And this is at the heart of why we all convened in the first place. So I appreciate it.
This is John Schreider. Could I make a comment, please?
Go ahead.
So, it seems like the group feels like there are lots of great ideas in this part of the proposal. And I'm one of the people who thinks there's lots of great ideas in this proposal. I'd just like to share a comment about the scope of this. I think it's focused, of course, on senior citizens and people with disabilities and special needs. And so I think just FYI, I should point out, because I've had a role in the development of the Housing Our Future plan that was spearheaded by GCF and LISC. And one of the key recommendations of the Housing Our Future plan is that the city of Cincinnati should increase assistance to all low and moderate income homeowners, including seniors and people with disabilities who are facing significant real estate tax increases, especially in neighborhoods that are experiencing rapid value appreciation. So I guess what I'm saying is the Housing Our Future plan sees this problem as a broader problem. Certainly the focus of this committee and these recommendations are appropriate for the group they're focused on, but I think there's a bigger picture issue that needs to be addressed on down the line as well.
And that's why the was included, because reentering citizens have such a difficult time with housing, and a lot of them are from extremely low income families. So if they were able to return back to their family's home and live there, if the owner of the property passes away, we don't want them re-entering the system in a bad way. We want to keep them in a stable home, and this would do so. But if it's reevaluated and then the tax value increases to the what it should be.
So Heather, as the chair of this group, it seems like there are people calling, instead of voting for this entire section of recommendations, that it might be better to split the discount and deferral up into recommendations, separate recommendations. Are you amenable to that?
I am.
Okay. And then it does seem like, so with this section, it's qualifications, discount, and deferral. So I'm going to call 3 votes. And so if you can be ready to unmute right away, just to state yes or no for qualification recommendations, yes or no for the discount recommendation, and yes or no for deferral. So before that, real quick, are there any questions from the chat bar?
Could you, Samantha, could you just repeat those options one more time? Because I don't think I followed it.
Keep up with us, Eric.
No,
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
We will go through one by one. So the first vote I will call will be on what's on your screen right now, qualifications. I will then call another vote, the second vote for discount. And then the third will be for the deferral. But I will call those separately. I just wanted to outline it.
You're gonna call them separately, or we're gonna vote 3 times when you call us?
Separately.
Okay.
But before the vote, are there any questions from the chat bar?
Yeah,
Samantha,
so real quick,
Go
in
ahead,
regard
chat
to
bar.
the discounts, excuse me, I'm reading from the chat bar in response to the discounts, will those apply retroactively to increases of value that happened in the past, or only to future increases in value?
That would be one of those questions that needs to be, it costs to do that. What the cost will be to tax revenue.
Yeah, let me clarify that, Heather, as well. It's the increase in value after purchase.
Thank you for that clarification, Ron.
And Ron, so the question, increase in value after purchase of that particular homeowner. So like if this got enacted, it would go back, and if somebody lived in the house 20 years at this point, it would go back to that particular date, correct?
Okay, so that's a different question. So you will set your reference point from the date that's determined by the legislation. Like if everything was to say, okay, everything starts flat based on when this legislation gets enacted. But I see what you're trying to say. Do you want to make it retroactive? I mean, the point here is to not take away any tax revenue. So it would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, I mean, this would apply to a baseline year, but this would be more of an effect for properties that are purchased after that legislation goes into effect.
So it's not retroactive. That was the question, whether it was going to be retroactive.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay. With that, so on your screen before you, if you can
If I
view.
have one quick question.
Okay.
Sorry. Just action on this first on the vote, the section 1, is that, are the qualifications, you have to meet all of those, or is it any one of those?
Well, you have to own and occupy the property. Beyond that, you have to either be 65 or older, or a person with a disability that is an owner or a dependent resident. And then beyond that, if B and C, those are the people that qualify for the discount or the deferral, then if one of those individuals passes away, then the surviving spouse can continue that discount or deferral.
Okay.
And same with E, it would be the surviving low-income house member if the property was, if the estate passed to them.
Got it. So they could be, okay, I got it. So there's a couple of these that could add up more than just the one. So they're independently. So you'd have to add all of those over 65, and then those again and the other qualifications could add up to the total that it might affect.
I'm sorry, it's the 65 or older, and people with disabilities or families that have children with disabilities. And then those are the people that qualify. And then beyond that,
got it. Okay.
Pass away.
Okay. So it's a smaller number. Okay. And the last thing I was going to say, I like if all of these are, when we vote on these, are factoring in what Heather said, that there are considerations before implementation, right? That
yes,
that their numbers will be ran.
Yes.
I think that's key. I would suggest putting in something that also says not just what the cost would be, but there should be, and there's people on this call are way smarter about this than me, but there should be a cost savings for helping these individuals at the right time, as opposed to helping, with other services in the city at wrong time, later down the road. So there should be a county and city, I'm hoping, savings if it's just economic, but if that math is going to be done, I think that's important to do it on both ends. So it's not just the cost, hopefully. There's actually a benefit. But good.
That, yes, it is with, the vote will be with this slide, the considerations before implementation. That kind of goes without an umbrella over everything. Eve, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you. The clarification on the last bullet about education must also be considered or built into implementation. What does that mean? The level of education of the individual, or does that education revenue, or?
Education revenue. Revenue for education and school.
Okay.
That needs to be changed then.
It really does.
That's not what it says.
Okay, I will make that note.
Samantha, just Chris Offrey here. I'm viewing this as sort of a conceptual recommendation with the idea that many of the details would be worked out later. Paul's comment, Eve's comments. There's a number of things that would have to be known before this could be voted on by city council or state legislature. And so it's a general idea that's being put forth as I understand it.
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you. So right now, I'm going to be calling the roll for qualifications, which are on your screen right now. So you are only voting on these qualifications when I call your organization's name. And please say yes or no. African American Chamber.
Okay, abstaining is not an option, right?
Oh, I apologize. Abstention is an option. Yep.
Okay, abstain.
Okay. Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
Yes.
Board of Education.
Abstain.
CNBDU.
Yes.
Council on Aging.
Abstain.
Community Action Agency. Okay. Home Builders Association.
Yes.
Home, or Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
Yes.
Home Ownership Center. Home Base. Legal Aid Society.
Yes.
Hispanic Chamber.
Yes.
UC School Planning.
Yes.
USGBC.
Yes.
Carol Gibbs, co-chair.
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Smitherman, co-chair.
Yes.
Okay, so the qualifications passed or had were voted to be approved. The second vote that we'll take is on this discount, which is before you on the screen. So yes, no, or abstention. African American Chamber.
Yes.
Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
Yes.
Board of Education.
Yes.
CNBDU.
Yes.
Council on Aging.
No.
Community Action Agency. Home Builders Association.
Yes.
Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
Yes.
The Home Ownership Center. Legal Aid Society.
Yes.
LISC.
Yes.
And LISC, I apologize, I did not call your name last time. Would you like to vote on the qualifications?
Or yes on the qualifications also.
Hispanic Chamber.
Yes.
UC School Planning.
Yes.
USGBC.
Yes.
Carol.
Abstain on this one.
And the Vice Mayor Smitherman.
Abstain.
Okay. The majority voted yes on discount. For the third vote, it is on deferral. The recommendation is before you on the screen. Yes, no, or abstention. African American Chamber.
Abstention.
Okay. Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
Yes.
Cincinnati Board of Education.
Abstain.
CNBDU.
Yes.
Council on Aging.
Yes.
Community Action Agency. I believe she's still on the call. Home Builders Association.
Yes.
Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
Yes.
Home Ownership Center. Legal Aid Society.
Yes.
LISC.
Yes.
Hispanic Chamber.
Yes.
School of Planning.
Yes.
USGBC.
Yes.
Carol Gibbs.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Smitherman.
Yes.
Okay. Recommendation to approve. So just as a recap, the vote on the qualifications, discount, and deferral all received approval. Heather, since that discussion took a little bit of time, I'm going to ask you to present these next few recommendations as quickly as possible, and then we will take a vote on these recommendations.
And Samantha, before you take that step, I just want to be clear that my understanding of what occurred is we passed those sets of recommendations, but they will not be coming before council. That there's other work that needs to be done. Am I clear about that? Just want to make sure I understand that. On what, even though they passed, that there's more work that needs to be done prior to my staff working on presenting that to council.
Absolutely, and thank you for saying that. I think that goes for any recommendation that we hear today. When it is passing through this working group, but it is not necessarily passing to council. So thank you for mentioning that, Vice Mayor. Okay, Heather, I'm gonna hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. So the tax fairness, and that this is if a property receives any of these tax benefits from the tax abatement, specifically the tax abatement stuff that is going to be passed by the other working group, then they would not be able to be registered on the city's short-term rental registry as anything other than a hosted property. And that is, this is the abatements and stuff are about our residents, and short-term rental registries are more about housing for people coming from outside. So it doesn't affect the hosted, like if the person lives there and is going to be there during the time that the people are renting, if they're renting out a room in their house or something, it does not affect that. But if they are, buying properties and they're using it as a commercial business on the short-term rental, then they would not be able. They would have to pick either the abatement or being on the short-term, being listed on the short-term rental registry. And you want me to go ahead and with the other ones at the same time?
Yes, please.
Okay, so recommendation number 1 is to change the zoning code to permit accessory dwelling units with a stipulation that the larger or at least one of the residences, if it's larger or smaller, be owner occupied at least 75% of the year or more, and that the owner that would then become a landlord get landlord training on fair housing, sample rental contracts, landlord best practices, and those things, so that they are fair to both the renter and they don't get taken advantage of themselves. Recommendation 2 is streamlining the approvals and waiving fees for building permits related to accessibility, such as widening doorways and hallways, curbless showers, step-free entries, cabinetry modifications for space for realtors. And then the question came about sound, extra sound installation to be considered as well. I don't know how that would actually work, that part of it work, but the rest of it would. Recommendation number 3, increasing funding, including grants and loans for programs that assist the elderly and people with disabilities and families with dependents that have a disability in maintaining and modifying their residence for accessibility, and be on a sliding scale for eligibility. Recommendation number 4 is education and information for homeowners and small contractors. And this plays off of one of the recommendations from the previous group, but it helps minority-owned contractors, minority-owned businesses, small businesses, and women-owned businesses. And they can use this education and information to expand their business and in marketing to families that aren't currently applying for tax abatements. There's a lot of work being done that might be eligible for this, or people might be more willing to put money into their property that don't know. So this would be both a benefit to homeowners and housing, and as well as small businesses, minority and women-owned businesses. And this information could be put in flyers for mailings for when taxes go out, and it could also be put in flyers for the small contractors in places that they frequent, like electrical supply, plumbing supply, stuff like that. Then recommendation number 5 is avoiding housing harassment by finding, and this is something that needs to go through a serious process. We don't even know if it's feasible. IT would need to be able to tell us if this is feasible, but a lot of people, families are experiencing harassment because people want their properties in neighborhoods that are increasing in value. So people are getting submitted, things are being submitted, complaints on their property, and then they're getting offers to buy the property. So the concern there, is there a way that if multiple ISP or, stuff comes in and you see the same ISP that's doing a lot of complaints, then maybe that ISP is someone that's harassing people. That sort of thing. I don't know if this can be tracked. If it can, then it needs to go to law to find out if they can do anything about it, and whether then it should be should it be a fine or a letter, something like that. So that one is going to require a lot more work. Recommendation number 6 is allow tenants who are seniors or persons with a disability to modify properties without requiring these individuals to return the property to its original condition upon move out. Now, this is actually only a recommendation if the Real Estate Investors Association or another organization similar to that education on the fact that these modifications increase value if done in a certain way, and that they might also be eligible for a tax abatement. So we're going to need to get their support before this recommendation can actually go forward beyond what we're presenting here. And then recommendation number 7 is make housing a priority by creating a position. And this goes to similar, it's essentially supporting recommendation number 3 from the previous group. But I wanted to point out that this recommendation and recommendation number 3 from the previous group also require an advisory board that's made up of organizations, that's made up of people, groups similar to this group right now. So it's not just the advocacy officer or housing officer, but it's the advisory group that goes with it that will make this a good thing.
Thank you, Heather. So before you right now, on the left-hand side is what was already voted on, section 1. Is there any discussion on section 2 or 3 at the moment? If not, I will take the vote on the recommendations as written.
My question is, I thought we were only addressing homeowners issues, but we've got a little slide here into renters. And do we want to put in to these recommendations?
Which recommendation?
6.
Well, it would actually be about the property owner and educating them that the modifications to their property would actually increase the value of their property and give them a tax abatement opportunity. But it directly helps renters as well. It helps both.
I'm asking. I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, but this was about homeowners and things that affect them in terms of losing their homes or being driven out of their homes recommendation 6 really impacts renters and not homeowners. Education, we have landlord education that goes on all the time, and I agree that that should be part of their education, but I'm not sure it fits in here. And I'm just asking the question.
Hearing no other discussion.
I have a question about the constitutionality of recommendation number 5. I think we ought to look at that. I have some concerns about that. Putting a limit on how many times people can reach out to somebody about potentially selling their house. Is that constitutional? I guess that's a question for the law department.
This is Caitlin Geiger from the law department. That is something we would want to look closely at before making a statement on this particular recommendation. We share the concern.
So I guess maybe we can reword this that there be more education on the benefits of this to property owners, that they would then be eligible for, that it increases their property value, and it also makes them eligible for possible tax abatement.
For recommendation 6, Heather?
Yes.
Got it. And for recommendation 5, as I mentioned, there is an accompanying document that was distributed that goes into what steps would need to be taken for recommendation 5. And it does say first to consult with the law department, the IT, before moving forward. Okay, so I'm gonna call the roll for the right side of the screen. It's section 2 and section 3. The recommendations as written with the edit to recommendation 6 to be more explicit about the benefits to property owners. Okay.
Heather, is there a recommendation 8?
Is there?
Yeah, is there? No?
don't-
Okay.
I don't think so.
Good. It was cut off on my screen. I didn't know. Thank you.
Clarifying question. So again, this next vote, Samantha, will be on section 2 and 3.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. So yes, no, or abstain. African American Chamber.
Boy, this is tougher than a vote in the Ohio Senate.
That's because it's already predetermined.
Yeah, only because I like Heather so much, I'm going to vote yes. Okay.
Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
No.
Board of Education.
Is it possible to say no to 1 or 2 of the recommendations, like yes, but no on 5 and 6? Does that get too complicated?
I think the vote right now is for the
Oh,
entire package.
Not a problem. Then overall, yes.
CNBDU.
Yes.
Council on Aging.
Yes.
Community Action Agency. So I just received word that Sharon Watkins from the Community Action Agency is on the call. She's unable to unmute, so she's submitting her vote via the chat. Did she submit a vote for this?
Yes.
Okay.
She submitted yes.
Okay, thank you. Home Builders Association.
No.
Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
Yes.
Home Ownership Center. I think Rick left the call. Legal Aid Society.
Yes.
LISC.
Oh, yes.
Hispanic Chamber.
Yes.
School Planning.
Yes.
USGBC.
With both of these together, we have to abstain.
Carol Gibbs.
With modifications to 6, yes.
Vice Mayor Smitherman?
Yes.
Okay, and this passes. Thank you to Heather and everyone that worked with her in this group. Okay, we are going to move on to the third group, residential tax abatement policy. Carol Gibbs and Dan Bauer co-chaired this focused recommendation group, so I'm going to pass it over to them to go through the recommendations.
And I will remind, we have 40 minutes left before this meeting ends, and time will be taken on people making statements. I'm going to call for each section, each line to be considered. Dan, do you have something you want to say about the overall recommendation?
Nope.
Okay. So new construction criteria. We have a category, the first category at 200,000. This has actually been reduced from 275, which is the current rule. And I need to be clear that I came into this to make sure that there were line items that would help low and moderate income families to build and rehab. You're welcome, Paul. Homes. So new construction, 200,000 currently. Questions?
So Carol, we had talked about this, that again, that's one of the 2 items that we actually in our votes were not our end majority vote. So
we are in a new meeting and a new conversation, Paul.
Well, that's not our recommendations coming out of the focus group, not that item.
There's been enough conversation. We've had enough emails that we're going to go line by line and we're going to look at each line. Do you have an objection to new construction being 200,000 with a 10-year term?
I do, and that our group did too. So we voted as a group that was not going to be on there. So the issue of that particular one is that with what we have right now, we have a scenario where there is an overweighting. We've talked about this of the better housing lead, for example, is overweighted in certain neighborhoods. This is actually one of the reasons why. So what we have is the only percentage of houses, and it's a small percentage, but it's under 20% of new construction that is not being built to lead. A large majority of that is in neighborhoods of lower incomes, and the quality of housing is lower. We have, and I've sent out information on this about the cost to build lead for lower income, smaller housing, and in a lot of the urban neighborhoods is not an increase to cost for the individuals in most cases. And we have proof of that. Sister Barbara talked about that quite a bit. We have examples we gave for mortgage costs versus upgrades. But what happens is there's a lack of education for the remaining builders and the remaining contractors to know how to do it. It is a learning process. This is where the extra recommendation came in, or proposal from the Home Builder Association, U.S. Green Building Council, and others, and it matches some of the other recommendations in the other groups of education that we wanted to support the smaller contractors, minority contractors, women-owned contractors, and anyone who had not been able to get the training on how to build not only sustainably and better, healthier housing more affordably, so being able to do it without raising prices, but also the visitability was part of that. So we're
as Carol mentioned, due to time, we are going to be limiting just comment to 2 minutes at a time. So if I could
Yeah.
Anybody else that has something to say?
Yeah, no, I understand.
Heather, as a point of clarification, please, what we have on, what we have on the screen and what is being proposed today, I'm confused. Is it what was passed by the committee when last we met? I'm hearing that there's something different.
This particular line item is exactly what was voted on and passed. And my understanding is there was no confusion on this particular line.
There was confusion and we
No, the
told you about it
confusion
5 minutes after the
supposedly was
call.
on the restoration, Paul.
No, it was on this one too. Mark, Corey's on there. He can tell you
okay.
about it.
Is there any other comments about this line? People like it, don't like it, want to raise it, want to lower it?
So this is John Schreider, and I apologize, but I would just like to make a more general comment. So, my concern, based on the studies that I've been involved in with the Housing Our Future group, is that we have a tax abatement program that is not benefiting moderate, certainly not low-income homeowners. And when I look at this chart as a whole, I see very high limits, in my opinion. And I just don't see why we are moving ahead with these high caps when we have a program that isn't benefiting our hardworking, moderate income homeowners.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's why we're going line by line, John. So your input is greatly appreciated.
And to that end, that's one of the reasons why we have to have that piece on the construction. Mark, Corey, do you want to chime in?
John, my understanding is that these are upper limit caps, not lower limit caps. People doing less would be able to apply for a tax abatement, but these are the upper level caps so that people doing more than that need to go to a higher level to get a higher tax abatement.
Correct.
Understood.
Yeah, this is not restricted anything as far as the development of that
Paul
quality. That's it.
Oh.
So that's the good news.
Anyone else have anything to say? If my opinion matters, I'd like to raise it back up to 275. But I would really love to hear from somebody else.
I agree with you, Carol. Raise it to 275.
Thank you.
So again, just clarification. We are going off of the last meeting, and yes, I was one of the ones that was confused on one of our votes. So I know that there is a time limit, but I'm just interested to hear the rest of Paul's explanation.
Were you confused on this particular vote, Mark?
I'm sorry, you broke up. What was that?
Were you confused on this particular vote? Because I didn't believe that you were on this one.
Well, it sounds like based off of what Paul was starting to say was that there was confusion on this point. So
The confusion was your vote. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah.
there were a couple of
saying-
times in our last meeting where I had some confusion.
Correct, but he's saying that you were confused on this vote. Were you confused on this vote?
Specifically to what point though on the matrix?
Those two, the two yellows that are on the screen there.
We had two votes. This was one of them.
Can you increase that? It's hard for me to see on my laptop.
Can you see it better?
Yes.
Okay. Samantha, help me with this. Should we vote on each line item separately? Or how should we do that?
So it seems like there was some confusion in the last meeting. I think what Carol was trying to say is this is a new meeting, and that's why we are not just voting directly on what is before you today. She's asking the group to go, line by line, and this is the chance to have discussion and edit it. We can do a vote on every line. That will take some time. But if the chairs would like me to do a vote on every line, I'm happy to do so.
Co-chair.
Samantha, why don't we discuss which question we have on a particular line and let the rest of them go as they are?
Okay, so I think right now it seems like there is a question around this first line, new construction with a cap of 200,000 and a term of 10 years. That's what we're discussing now.
And let me just say, Samantha, if that's the only item, you know, I'm agreeing with Mike. Let's just vote on this one and then take everything else as a package. And maybe that moves us forward. I just don't know where there's going to be dissension around the rest of the, if the level is 200, there was a question to move it to 275. If that's what we're going to do, we can vote up or down on it and then move forward. And maybe there's consensus around the rest of it.
Okay, I can call a vote. So the vote is to move the cap for new construction to $275,000.
There's a question about this from Eric.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. What is that?
Yeah, I just I just put in the chat, like, I would like some background. Is 200 or 275, is that what the market is dictating? Where did that number come from? Is that the majority of new construction that's happening or will happen in the next 10 years? I got a question about why 10 years for this abatement and not 15 like the others.
Sure.
So
I can help.
it's just really difficult for me to vote with some very basic questions. So I guess I should abstain because I don't want to hold up, you know, people spend a lot of time working on this and I don't want to hold up the vote or all of this. So I think I'll just abstain
These were
for the vote.
this new construction and this first remodel that has no environmental constraints on it were lowered in trying to compromise with homeowners, with Paul and the Home Builders Association, the Realtors Association, to try and keep line items in here that were not restrictive to the extra income that was required to do any kind of lead or HERS. You know, the argument is that it doesn't cost anymore, which we all know it does. And the argument
lower incomes,
gas and electric bills monthly. However, you know, people in low and moderate income have a difficult time getting mortgages to begin with. To add that kind of money onto a mortgage it may or may not be possible for them to get. And it may be that savings is not worth it on those houses. You know, I'm sure that there's some background here, but as far as I'm concerned, it was a matter of trying to come to something that could be agreed upon. I frankly do not agree on the caps on these. I think they're too high, but that was my giving. I'm now saying I would like it to go back to 275 and I'd like a vote on that.
I'd like a vote on 0 then. I want to have that. Look, we have pressure right now. We are putting the burden back on low-income people, and that is on low-income households. That's exactly what we, as a group, said we didn't want.
We're not putting burden back on them.
Yes, we are, Carol. I'm in this. This is what I do for a living.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
So I'm hearing a call for 2 votes. I'm going to take one at a time. The first vote is to increase the cap for new construction to 275,000 with a term of 10 years. African American Chamber.
Abstain.
Okay. Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
Abstain.
Board of Education.
Yes.
CNBDU.
Yes.
Council on Aging.
Abstain.
Community Action Agency.
Samantha, Sharon had to leave the call.
Okay, thank you. Home Builders Association.
Abstain.
Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
No.
Home Ownership Center. I don't know if Rick got back on. Legal Aid Society.
Abstain.
LISC.
Abstain.
Hispanic Chamber.
Abstain.
School Planning.
Abstain.
US Green Building Council.
No.
Carol.
Obviously, yes.
Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Okay, so the vote tallies were 4 for yes, 2 for no, and then 8 abstentions. So the vote does not pass. So the second vote is for a reduction of the cap for new construction to 0. So I'm going to take that vote now. African American Chamber.
Abstain.
Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
Hey,
Board of Education.
Yes.
CNBDU.
Yes.
Council on Aging.
Abstain.
Home Builders Association.
Yes.
Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
Yes.
Legal Aid Society.
Abstain.
LISC.
Abstain.
Hispanic Chamber.
Abstain.
School of Planning.
No.
US GBC.
Yes.
Carol.
Obviously, I don't want it to go to 0. That cuts out low income families, so no.
And Vice Mayor Smitherman. Is the Vice Mayor still on the call?
He's just getting added back in.
Oh, okay. Vice Mayor Smitherman, we just took a vote on whether to reduce the cap for new construction to $0.
Listen, my whole system just went boom right in the middle of the phone.
It happens.
So, say what was this? What was the second vote to do what on the?
So the second vote was to reduce the cap on new construction to $0.
No.
Okay. So there were 5 yeses, 3 nos, and 6 abstentions, so it does not pass. So with that, this line item seems to be staying as written. Is that what I'm hearing from the group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me, just for clarification, is that 200,000 then the cap now?
Yes, so it's
reduced
200,000 with the 10-year cap.
5, which currently is, to 200,000.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that right.
Was there any discussion for the next line, or I guess where's the next line that needs to be discussed or voted on, or can we vote on the remainder of the lines together?
The only other item that we had as a change had to do with the historic. Everything else was as a group, what we were proposing.
Okay.
And I had suggested we lower the caps.
So real quick with the historic renovation restoration, Carol, can you please explain, give a little context for this? And then Paul, can you explain what you'd like to see changed with the 2-minute limit?
So this is really historic restoration. We've got renovation here also. And it's pre-1940 building, could be 1920, doesn't make any difference. The issue is whether or not the cost of taking an old home, an old home, and restoring it back to an ability to live in, and how much that costs to actually do HERS or LEED, And it costs more to do that than it does to actually build a new home. That's why it's listed as different from the rest of the remodels.
So Carol and I actually agree that we wanted to try to get for some of the harder homes to do some of the deeper renovations and restorations to give it potentially an extra amount like we did with visibility. And so this is more structural. This is all this was. And so it does not cannibalize on either lead or visitability. Structurally, this would work, in our opinion, to be better as a bonus criteria. So we just wanted to move it down as a bonus criteria for, and I think as a starting point, legal will get involved on what year makes sense and buildings inspections, that kind of thing. But 1920 is probably a better starting point to write in there. But pre-1920 buildings getting, like visitability, an extra 100,000 in cap at any level. So that way, like Carol wants, is we have choice. So if the remodel category of 200,000 with no lead, no HERS, they could get another 100,000 if they're doing remodel work on a building pre-1920. If they do a HERS a certification, then they could do the 300,000 plus 100,000 cap. They could get 400,000. So that was to give flexibility at every level on the remodels, and it's just more structural. I agree with what Carol's saying. If we put it there and we don't define it like that, it'll actually cut the entire rehab criteria, because we went in the last 3 years from 2 lead houses, 2 lead remodels, to then 6, to then 12, and we're at 26 this year. Once we changed the tax abatement in 2017 to equal to new construction. So we don't want to slow down that momentum. We have proof that it works. This will cut all of it if we left it in this particular line. So I just want to move it down to bonus criteria. That's what we voted on. And the same thing, it came out of there the same way. But yeah, it gives more flexibility.
We did not vote on it being moved, Paul. We just voted on that line.
Well, I mean, I would rather have it. I want it like you do, Carol, but I want it in the visibility. I don't want to vote, get rid of it. And we can if we want, but I was planning on, I agree with you to have it. I just want to get in the bonus criteria.
So what I'm hearing is that a vote should be taken on moving historic renovation restoration pre-1940 building to bonus criteria with an additional cap of $100,000.
That can be used across the criteria, any of the tiers. No restrictions, so it's just per tier. Besides the year.
Where it is and having a $750,000 cap.
Okay, so the vote I will take now is to keep it where it is. So if you vote yes, you want the criteria, this historic renovation restoration highlighted here, to remain where it is. If you vote no, you would like it moved to bonus criteria with an additional cap of 100,000. Is that clear?
Can I add one small thing? If you vote yes to keep it in that tier, I mean, I'm not being facetious. 90% of the remodel criteria is useless. I mean, we might as well just get rid of all the other parts. Because it's 750,000, there's no additional advantage to go do anything. And it's not defined as anything different but the year. That is the vast majority of all the major rehabs is pre-1940, even 1920. So that's why if we do that, you might as well simplify the whole remodel criteria, get rid of lead, get rid of HERS. And visibility probably at that point. I just want to be clear how that changes it.
So the vote right now is to keep the historic renovation restoration where it is. Yes, no, or abstain. African American Chamber.
You're going to see this one coming. Abstain.
Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
No.
Board of Education.
Yes.
CNBDU.
Yes.
Council on Aging,
Abstain.
Community Action Agency. Did Sharon come back or?
She had to leave.
Okay. Home Builders Association.
No.
Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
I vote to move it.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Was that yes or no?
To move it, whichever one is to move it.
That would be no. Okay. Legal Aid Society,
Abstain.
LISC,
Abstain.
Hispanic Chamber,
Abstain.
sorry, School of Planning,
Yes.
U.S. Green Building Council,
No.
Carol,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Smitherman.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 5 votes for yes, 4 votes for no, and 5 abstentions. I'm not sure if this is a law question or the co-chairs. Since there are 5 yeses and 5 abstentions, I'm not sure what that means for.
Typically, that means it fails.
Okay, so the motion, so the vote to keep it where it is failed. So it'll be moved to bonus criteria with the additional cap. Am I understanding this correctly?
That's correct.
No, wouldn't we have to vote on that too?
We just did.
So when I said it out loud, I was explaining it so people would know, like, yes meant that it would be kept there, no meant it could potentially be moved. But I do feel like it would be best to take
Have a vote.
specifically moving it with the additional cap.
Say what you mean.
Okay. Okay.
I love
Okay.
school board member Eve Bolton. Take a vote. Take a vote.
That's right. We love to vote.
I'm okay. So this vote is on specifically moving historic renovation and restoration to bonus criteria with an additional cap of 100,000, an additional term of 0 years. So no additional term. With that, so it's yes, no, or abstention. African American Chamber,
Okay, I'm repetitive, abstain, or consistent.
Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors,
Yes.
Board of Education,
No.
CNBDU,
No.
Council on Aging,
Abstain.
Housing Opportunities Made Equal,
Yes.
Home Builders Association,
Yes.
Legal Aid Society,
Abstain.
LISC,
Abstain.
Hispanic Chamber,
Abstain.
School of Planning,
No.
USGBC,
Yes.
Carol,
No.
Vice Mayor Smitherman.
No.
Okay, so there were 4 yes votes, 5 no votes, and 5 abstentions. So that vote does not pass. So at this moment, it remains as is.
But that's not our recommendation.
But that's where it would stay. I mean, that's a part of the process, Paul. And I know you feel very passionate about it, and so do I. So at this point, it will
fine.
be neutral.
Yeah, I mean, okay. We have legal issues with that one. That's why it'll blow up the whole thing. So it's fine. I understand. It won't go that way. So we're just wasting time on that one.
So at this point, as the chart is before you, everything on the chart is remaining as is. And there are a few more recommendations that this group has. Co-chairs, would you like to take a vote on this chart as is, or would you like the group to vote on the entire set of recommendations from this residential tax abatement group?
I would think one vote should work.
Okay, so I'm going to hand it back over to Carol and Dan, if you want to kind of go through the next set of recommendations. I'm going.
But what? Excuse me, not to belabor it because I have to be at a quorum in just a minute or two. But should the other ones did not get voted on because there was not conflict about them, correct?
That's correct.
It would seem to me that then the full chart as revised should be voted on.
That's fine.
Okay. So right now you are voting on what is on your screen right now as written.
As revised.
Nothing has been revised.
Okay. So there's been no changes.
No changes.
Okay.
It's exactly what is on the screen right now.
Great.
African American Chamber, I think I can guess, but.
Yep, you got it. Abstain.
Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors,
Abstain.
Board of Education,
Yes.
CNBDU,
Yes.
Council on Aging.
Abstain. Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Home Builders Association,
Yes.
Home, Housing Opportunities Made Equal,
Abstain.
Legal Aid Society,
Abstain.
LISC, I'm sorry,
Abstain.
Hispanic Chamber,
Abstain.
School Planning,
Yes.
USGBC,
No.
Carol,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Smitherman.
Yes.
Okay, so there were 6 votes yes, 1 no vote, and 7 abstentions. So with that, this recommendation does not pass. I'm not, to the co-chairs, I'm not sure, do you want to move on to the other recommendations, or would you
Yes.
like that?
No, let's move on.
Okay. I'm going to hand it back over to Carol and Dan.
So I am pretty passionate about this. I'm not sure what that will mean, but I would like to see the 4 families that have been sitting abandoned for years to have abatements that would encourage people, residents, to buy them, live in them, rent the other 3 apartments in them, to bring those buildings back to life and to offer low and moderate income housing for folks. Dan, you want to do this?
Yeah, so these were the aims of the overall program. It would be a program that, small minority, women-owned contractors could take advantage of when doing kind of the smaller scale development within the city. It would be a program to encourage investment in existing affordable housing and not reduce the overall supply. It was a program that would encourage family units, the 2 or more bedrooms, and that was linked to the recommendation to expand the program to the 4 family units. It would not reduce the overall unit growth to keep up with demand both of a growing population and just for continuing to put new housing units on the market in the city. It would encourage low cost of home ownership. It would, encourage transparency just in the implementation of the program. And then considering the incentives with local competitors, so as people are choosing to live here versus our competing jurisdictions, that the city would continue to retain and attract residents. And then it would also consider the overall tax rates and impacts on new levies. I think there was some discussion about perception related to that one. And then encourage historic conservation as well. So this were kind of the guiding principles that led to, in the discussion of the subcommittee, most of the chart that you saw previously. And then considerations. Consideration one is more of a conversation over how the program is implemented. This would just ensure that existing value, the program does not encourage people to remove existing taxable value. A lot of the conversation has been over tear downs and when the auditor decides to apply the abatement, like what moment it starts, and ensuring that it starts after existing property value pre-demolition stays in place. And then there was a recommendation to ensure that the way abatements are done aren't overly inflating comps in particular neighborhoods, and a review of every 3 to 5 years, and the review including community input. Consideration two, when the program has been changed previously, that there would just be adequate notice before the change is implemented. And then there has been discussion about when applicants under the current program, what grandfathers you in when you're in the process of applying under the current program, because as the program is implemented, you have to complete construction and have your documentation ready in order to apply for the abatement. So it's, at what point during the construction process are you grandfathered in under the existing program?
We do have 3 minutes left, and I believe we want to take a vote on the remaining recommendations.
Okay. Long-term recommendation was exploring a tiered approach that would require a study similar to, there's been a lot of discussion about Columbus, and they paid consultants to do a database study to have a defensible tiered program. And then this is a recommendation that was with the other committee related to prohibiting or otherwise restricting abatements from being listed in a certain way on the rental registry. And then the final one is incentives for renter co-ops. Kind of exploring what that could be.
Thanks. So at this point, because I know we have a hard 11 o'clock stop, and I do want the Vice Mayor and Carol to end with some next steps. I'd like to take a vote on section 2, 3, and 4 of the residential tax abatement policy recommendations. African American Chamber.
Yes. Yes.
Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors.
Yes.
Board of Education. CNBDU.
Yes.
Council on Aging. Oh, I just got a note, she had to leave. Home Builders Association.
Yes.
Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
Yes.
Legal Aid Society.
Yes.
LISC.
Yes.
Hispanic Chamber.
Abstain.
School Planning.
Yes.
USGBC.
Yes.
Carol Gibbs.
Samantha, I'm back. I've got the dogs out and back in before I left. So I think I'm a yes.
Thank you, Eve.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Carol? Oh, yes. And Vice Mayor Smitherman.
Yes.
Okay, great. The section 2, 3, and 4 of these recommendations passed unanimously, with one abstention. At this point, since we have 1 minute left, I do want to turn it over to the co-chairs to just wrap this stage in the process up and explain to working group members what they can expect next.
So first, thank you very much for everyone's commitment to a year and a half. And obviously COVID-19 impacted our ability and slowed us down, but I'm very happy with the consensus that we had around the recommendations today. Let me say that the issues regarding the cap that did not pass, that we certainly, my office will work and continue to work, because I hope to put something forward on the floor of council. So I'm going to still continue to talk to you all and engage you. My sense is that we didn't go a year and a half to be caught on 2 points and not have something go before council for an up or down vote regarding tax abatement. So we'll continue to work through that and try to find a little better consensus, but hope to submit those areas where we have total consensus. We'll be working to put something forward.
Thank you. Okay, with that, thank you to everyone who attended. This recording will be available on YouTube, and feel free to email me or visit the property tax website if you have any questions.
Real quick, Samantha, can you give us, or maybe Council Vice Mayor Smitherman, can you give us some kind of a timeline on when you anticipate this issue going on council agenda?
I hope to put something forward, Dan, as early as August, the first week when we come back. And I don't plan for a vote in August. I'd like to hold it. Obviously, the logistics of the mayor, depending on the recommendations, he's going to decide what committees these items go before. I will lobby that they come before economic growth and zoning, okay? But Chairman Mann, there could be a motion that he feels very strongly about should go before his committee. But to the extent that I can get them in economic growth and zoning, that's where I will have them. I then, if that happens, I will hold them on my agenda, would be my goal, and for us to have a vote on them in September.
And thank you very much. And again, thank you for your initiative. You, both of you and Carol, for putting this study group together. I think it's been very helpful and instructive.
And thank you. And I'm going to, again, in closing, I understand the heart of this with the caps, that I will do my best to find the consensus around where we have consensus and try to put something forward for council to say yes or no on.
Ron, in answer to your question, that would be the tiered system. And we have to do some more study in order to get to that.
Oh.
Thanks for including the school board and the children of Cincinnati in all of this. We really appreciate it. Often we're not at the table. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Great leadership.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Chair
Have a good day.
Have a nice day.
Thank you, guys.